Every year we get some amazing, refreshing anime that leaves people in awe. Last year we got Frieren, which by all accounts was amazing. So much so that not even the diehard FMA fans could keep it from taking the top spot on Mao. And now, this year, Madhouse is animating Orb, and so far it's been shaping up to look amazing. Now, do I think it'll be the next Frieren? No, not at all. But, considering this manga was already immensely popular in Japan, and the first 3 episodes has some genuine quality to them, I do hope I eat my words. Amongst the sea of massive IPs coming out this season, an anime by the name Orb about the movements of the earth completely caught me off guard. Orb is an anime that takes place during 15th century Poland. Yep, you heard that right, Poland. And because it's 15th century Europe, the church holds a lot of power in choosing what is and isn't allowed, in which the idea of heliocentrism is considered blasphemy and punishable by death, and it quickly sets the tone. If you mess around, you'll find out. And while the concept sounded interesting on paper, I never expected the quality of storytelling I was about to witness. Once the anime shows you what makes it seinen, it introduces you to Rafał, an intelligent, confident young little boy who fakes his zealous personality in order to manipulate those around him. And he does this so that he can live an easy life showered in praise. But something gets in the way of his manufactured plan to a perfect life, or rather, someone. Hubert is a tall, menacing heretic who is tortured into abandoning his astronomical theories and given an ultimatum. Recant or die. And my man chose option 3. Lie and blackmail a kid into continuing your research. Bro even gave Rafał a warning before he pulled out his inner Assassin's Creed. It's an incredibly cool setting, and the fact that it's basically the anime version to a real life story is pretty cool. And the way Org uses the characters and storytelling to create this deep engagement is top quality. The characters in specific have been amazing so far. They each have their own individual personalities and sense of direction with how they want to live their lives. Like I mentioned before, Rafał's the kind of guy who sees himself objectively. He's intelligent and he makes use of it. He appeases the masses in order to garner an advantage for himself. He has no issue taking advantage of the fact that the people around him are so easy to manipulate. He'll do whatever he has to in order to get an easy life, and that's how you're first introduced to him. But very quickly, the story makes it apparent that there's a part of him that wants nothing more than to follow his true passion, astronomy. But he's afraid of the scorn and the prosecution it'll bring along. So it's pretty clear early on that underneath that pompous bravado, there's an internal conflict between his passion and his logic. Part of what makes this anime so incredible is its ability to completely build a character and have them grow quickly alongside each other. Like I mentioned earlier, Rafał had this internal conflict with himself. He wanted to pursue astronomy but couldn't bring himself to do it. So when Hubert comes in and forces him to help him with his research, you can almost tell Rafał doesn't resist too much. Not that he's given much of a choice, but he seems to somewhat accept it very quickly. That part of him that's been longing to come out is starting to pull him in. He can't resist but be curious about the things Hubert can show him. And through this singular interaction with Hubert, he starts to grow, more than the entirety of Tenten's character in over 700 episodes. Hubert and Rafał constantly challenge each other's beliefs. Hubert would talk about how the geocentric model isn't beautiful. It's based on the idea that Earth is the lowest place in the universe, and therefore all the sin that leaves heaven ends up there. Rafał would deny Hubert over and over till slowly but surely he starts to become skeptical. He starts wondering what if, then hits an epiphany which solidifies his resolve. And it's not just Rafał whose character shines through this interaction. But before I explain how, I'm gonna warn you. I've been trying to avoid some specific scenes, but in order to genuinely give you a sense of all the things that make this anime so good, I'm gonna have to talk about specifics. And if you want to come back and finish the video, that's up to you, but I really would appreciate that. Anyways, Hubert, Rafał, and Rafał's father Potocki are all people who love astronomy, but each of them ends up walking a different path to achieve what they want. We'll get to Rafał in a minute, but first, Hubert is someone who seems to be enamored with the idea that the universe God created must be beautiful. And it seems like his initial belief led him to spend his entire life trying to prove his theory, which is what makes that scene that reveals his true feelings hit so much harder. Up till this point, Hubert seemed adamant that his intuition was right and that he would prove it right. But once Rafał finds his letter, you start to see what was really behind the mask. It's not that he was necessarily lying in his adamancy, but rather it shows that he was struggling to cope with the impossibility of his research. He couldn't bring himself to abandon his life's work, so he tried to deflect it and he tried to have someone else pull the plug so he didn't have to bear witness to the end. And Rafał was perfect. He outwardly seemed to want nothing to do with it all. And Rafał was this close to burning everything, but his arrogance wouldn't allow him. He decided to believe that he could prove it regardless of how impossible the task was. And with Potocki, we don't know much of his past, but what we do know of his present shows a completely different path. He was also convicted of blasphemy based around researching astronomy, and it clearly still has a grasp on him deep down, but he's a coward. The moment he sees danger, he betrays Rafał, justifying it by assuming Rafał still has a second chance. So between Potocki's cowardice compliance and Hubert's adamant resolve but lack of confidence, we have two different paths that these father figures have laid out for Rafał. And well, let's just say Hubert unintentionally passed the torch to his successor by turning himself into a literal human torch. May he rest in peace. Over the course of these 3 episodes, we witness Rafał's growth in all its glory. In episode 1, you're shown glimpses of the two sides of Rafał's arrogance. The one side that will arrogantly use others to live a life of praise, and the side that wants to abandon that all for the sake of his interests. But in episode 1, his manipulative arrogance is what rules his actions. By the end of episode 2, he embraces his selfish arrogance and he even lies to his father in order to indulge in his passion. Which is so refreshing to see because so often characters are given an ultimatum and for whatever reason they'll just stand by their word instead of pretend to agree then do what they want. His arrogance in episode 2 was completely different than in episode 1 but also similar in nature because in both cases he's manipulating those around him to satisfy them, also that he can get what he truly wants in the end. And the story constantly reminds you of that. At the end of episode 2, he's rambling on about his plans going forward, and he's talking about how he's gonna prove Hubert's theory of heliocentrism. But in the way he speaks, he's so sure of himself, it's not a matter of if, but when for him. And that exact arrogance was what led to his ultimate demise. Yeah, the person we thought was the MC dies in episode 3. And I don't think this is an Attack on Titan situation where we just thought he died. I don't think he's coming back. And the reason he kicked the bucket was honestly so damn fitting for his character. So far, we've seen Rafał as an arrogant, intelligent boy who's willing to lie in order to satisfy people. But in episode 3, his father sells him out for researching quote-unquote blasphemy, and Rafał is subsequently thrown in jail. The story had already established that you get one chance to recant. If caught again, it's game over. And once Rafał is thrown in jail, he starts to reflect on what's happened in his life so far. He starts trying to convince himself that it was enough, and he starts to feel like he's lost everything in his life because of his passion for astronomy, almost falling victim to this depressive state that would inevitably lead him down one of those two paths. But then, this happens. And that's it. Rafał is convinced of what he has to do. All Rafał has to do in order to continue his research is lie like he always has. But he stands on business.
I told you not to touch me, old man.
Sorry, it just comes with a job.
The university admission form, which is almost symbolic of his original manipulative arrogance, is offered to him with the condition of recanting. And we see his inner monologue. He's being logical the entire time. He says that there are only words. But his answer is, I believe in heliocentrism. Within 3 episodes, this kid has become someone who's willing to outwardly oppose the authority of the church from someone who only inwardly let his selfish desires exist. He became someone who wore his desires on his sleeve, not deterred by death or torture. So much so that even the Inquisitor, who was seemingly being genuine to Rafał earlier with his advice, comes in and questions him. And the way Rafał responds is by absolutely ridiculing the way the church opposes heliocentrism. He says that they're scared of the truth, and obviously the Inquisitor looks at him confused because Rafał just threw his life away just to ridicule the church. He asks him if this was truly the right answer for his future, and the way Rafał responds is by quoting Hubert. A wrong answer isn't necessarily a meaningless one. Like, surely we can all agree this is the type of thing that takes other anime 3 seasons to get to. Quoting your dead mentor's line as a response to the perspective that you once held? This is some endgame shit, which technically in this case it is the endgame, at least for Rafał, who decides to stick it to the church by committing disappear. And upon seeing this, the Inquisitor is completely shaken. He starts to rant about how Rafał is doomed to an eternal suffering in the afterlife, to which Rafał responds by quoting a bunch of different philosophers, of which includes Epicurus' line, "When we exist, death is not, and when death is, we are not," which describes his belief that death isn't bad because we cease to exist, and therefore we can't experience it. And wouldn't you know, I just wrote a paper with the exact same line not even 24 hours earlier. And that may seem irrelevant, but the reason I bring it up is because it puts into perspective the massive difference in perspective that we have compared to these people. In the modern day, these are well-known philosophers respected for their knowledge, considered to largely be ahead of their time in their thinking. But the way the anime depicts it, these are heathens who lived in the past and misguided people. They don't recognize these philosophies as anything more than blasphemous statements. So to us, Rafał seems to be an intelligent person whose actions are justified, but to the populace under the church, he's basically a lunatic who deserves a little time on the rotisserie. And the reason I'm even talking this much about Rafał when he dies anyways is because Rafał being well written makes his death all the more surprising. If this is a character that the author can afford to get rid of, then the future characters in the story are probably going to be great. Either that or they're going to have to use Rafał the same way they did with Himmel and Frieren. a character that supersedes their life and can affect the story and characters in major ways. And considering the title in Japanese is Chi Chikyu no Undo ni Tsuite, it makes me wonder if it really might be the case. The reason I say that is because this character, Chi, it likely refers to Chikyu, which means earth. But I can't help but think of the possible play on words that could exist, because Chi can also mean blood, and Chi can also mean wisdom. And considering that searching for this kind of wisdom may lead to your death, it kinda seems fitting with every definition. But look, I'm not an expert in Japanese, and considering the fact that episode 3 shows the kanji in translation for it, I'm probably just pulling at straws. But regardless, I feel like thinking of it this way is kinda cool anyways. It makes you extra aware of the themes. And if Orb continues to follow this amazing trajectory, this will definitely be an amazing anime. It's super interesting and it's definitely a must watch for me. Also, Kenjiro Suda voices in this anime, so yeah, I'm a little biased. I'm gonna simp for this man and his voice till the day I die. No, but genuinely, it's a great story that is definitely gonna go down as one of the more well-written anime this season. If you want to watch more anime-related content, be sure to catch me live over on Twitch. If you've enjoyed, consider subscribing. Have a nice day. Peace.